Welcome to the Responsible Marketing Podcast, conversations about marketing, sustainability, and how we can all help in becoming more responsible organisations. I'm Jo, a marketing strategist and consultant with a career spanning corporate, small medium business and self-employment, incorporating marketing and commercial skills in various guises, and now flying the flag for a more sustainable and kind future for all. This time I'm joined by Annie Soulsby, founder of the Sustainable Life Coach. Annie had no choice. She was born into sustainability by default, and ever since has studied, worked in corporate or founded organisations with sustainability as an underlying thread. She prides herself on being an educator, a facilitator and an explainer for how to and what we can gain from embracing sustainability both in a work and personal environment. Annie and I talk about the relationship between materialism, dopamine and consumer addiction, a simple way to offset premium pricing for more sustainable products and services, could we switch the advertising industry on its head, and sunk cost fallacy. Let's dive straight in. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to have Annie Soulsby with me today. Hi Annie, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks Jo. Thanks for inviting me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I'm excited for everyone to hear and see you on the video, but also to talk about, so we'll start the podcast by talking about your background, because your background's incredible. I mean, you started off as a qualified scientist, but you've done so much more since then. And actually what you do now, you're quite a busy lady, actually, it has to be said, with lots of things going on. So could you just give me a little bit of background about kind of obviously the qualifications you've got, what you did after uni, because I think that's really interesting, and then where you find yourself now?
Yeah, sure. So I actually did environmental science at Leeds University in the 90s. Shh. Giving away a little secret.
No secrets, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. This was sort of a very much an emerging sort of field. And after completing the course, unfortunately, there wasn't a huge vast array of roles and job opportunities available, unless you were like a water engineer who wanted to specialize, or somebody who wanted to do lots of volunteering and had your own car and all of these other things. Yeah, so I found it a bit limiting. So I ended up applying for the graduate scheme for British Telecom, BT. And then left the Northeast and went to the big city to get my proper job, what my mum says, and worked in the corporate environment there for almost a decade, various different telecommunications companies, which really gave me a good understanding of how businesses work, what their pressures are, customer management, marketing, all sorts of different events, everything in terms of how to kind of operate within those big clients. And it was good fun. And, the BT was a great employer. I met so many great people. And going down to London, obviously, was a bit of a game changer.
Exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Getting to meet lots of different types of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it got to the point where it wasn't really satisfying my soul. I actually went and did a couple of nice holidays. So I went to Africa and I did a couple of projects with some cheetah. One point where we rescued some cheetah cubs and then we fed them and then we actually released them afterwards. I also did a trip to India, and I can remember coming back from that trip in particular. And I had my backpack on my bag and I got off the tube and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm back in London. I really want to talk to people about my trip. And everybody was busy. And I kind of got home to my flat and I was like, I've worked so hard to achieve this level of, comfort. And I had my own property. I had this widescreen TV, lovely sofas, all these nice big dining table, pieces of art, all this kind of stuff. But you know what? I had more connection and more fun in the middle of the village with the community in India than I did arriving home. And that's when it was, it was kind of, I've got to change the scenario.
That's a massive, materialistic revelation, isn't it?
Yeah, because I was just listening to another podcast, sorry,
Yes, okay. No, you're allowed. The more the merrier.
about this fact that materialism and searching for more and more stuff gives you a dopamine hit initially, but then it doesn't
Yeah.
really sort of last in terms of providing happiness. You get used to what you have, you always want something new, and so you're on this perpetual treadmill
Yeah, it's an
toward
addiction, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of found myself falling off that treadmill around about 20 years ago. And so that started my journey towards where I am today.
Yeah.
Looking at, I did have a gap year because I never took time off between school and university, other like or after my first degree, unlike other people. So I did that, and then I did my master's, and then I was in East Africa for 7 years,
Yeah.
working in communications, TV and radio, running my own NGO. And then I came back to the UK and I was like, how do I put all of this together?
Mm.
Because living in Tanzania is very much about the case of we can talk about climate change there, but that's about adaptation because the problem isn't East Africans. The problem isn't they're not the ones who are generating all these emissions and haven't done for centuries, unlike what we're doing right here in the
Absolutely. But
West.
they're still affected by it. Yeah.
Massively.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way to solve climate change and improve people's lives in those countries is to sort out what we're doing here.
Mm.
We need to. It's not about
Mm.
making their lives better by being there and doing stuff in country. It's about making sure that we're minimizing our impact
Almost
here.
working on the back office rather than it being kind of just at the forefront of the impact when it's happening. So, and the NGO that you set up, well, first of all, two questions on that. So, your
Mm.
corporate experience, did that help you set the NGO up for a start because you'd understood lots of different facets of business technically? And also, did you then see any impacts that you were having immediately, or was it you kind of like set this NGO up and you did the communications piece and then that's kind of continued and grown in gravitas and impact from there, so that has that continued as well?
So the first part was that yes, the skills and experience that I had from the corporate world, some of those did translate into the NGO world, but it was quite a challenge to kind of like think about a different way of funding and a different way of operating
Yeah,
and
okay.
how to do projects and your beneficiaries, different needs and wants from those who are willing to give you money and those who need your results from the projects, etc.
Mm.
Um, but it was still the same thing in a lot of ways. You've got a client, and you want to kind of give them what they want and what they need. So yes and no in terms of it was still a learning experience.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But so yeah, so the communications part was a little of a challenge as well. Because we did the radio show. And at this point, again, I was still a little bit ahead of the curve. I always feel further since deciding to do environmental science in 1994. I feel I've always been slightly ahead
A bit of a
of where
leader.
we are.
Mm.
Yes. So these ideas were emerging, but not quite fully understood, I think, in the context of who was willing to put their finger up and fund those types of ideas. I
Yeah.
did win 2 awards for my concept at MIT University at a climate change competition, which was amazing. But just time ran out in terms of being able to get things organized to pursue that particular project any further. But I was working on a TV show, which was basically a mobile production unit. So it was a little local bus. And basically, they had a film crew in there and the presenters. And the idea
Amazing.
was that it went through the same routes that the normal bus would go through, but it would invite people on board. And the idea was that they got a free ride as long as they contributed to the program. And then they were asked questions about the government or healthcare or about the environment or
Okay.
any sort of current affairs issues. And then we also did the section that was not so heavy, so that we talked about fashion and
Yeah.
music and things like that. So they had a little bit of a balance to the program, but that was really good fun, really, really good crew.
So
Um,
were you gauging their opinion from almost like a political point of view, or and also obviously those environmental impacts? You kind of almost canvassing their opinions and how they were being affected. Um, so you could use that data how? So that you could use data to petition for more funding, or was it more of a kind of political stance, or what was the reason for that?
so there's a couple of different things that the program was looking to achieve. So some of the funders wanted certain topics to be discussed within the show,
Okay.
so that it was highlighting sort of that idea of, people are talking about it in the bus, it's on the TV, other people would
Yeah.
talk about it at home or would
Yeah.
talk about it at work.
Yeah.
So yeah, so lots of different topics discussed, things that are quite important, like, level of depression or, women's rights. And, very interesting to see what the responses are from random people who just came and joined the bus route that day.
Yeah.
So you got all sorts of really fascinating stories, but also heartwarming, funny, just really, I would love to do it in the UK. Can you imagine taking a bus around and getting people's opinions on all sorts of different things?
I
It's
think
like
you'd have people queuing up to give their opinion, especially right now. You would get
yes.
so many different, different perspectives as well, wouldn't you? It's absolutely brilliant way of doing it, I think. Maybe we should do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, social media is very much controlled by the algorithms, and
Yeah,
who's what you're going to get a very different conversation in TikTok from what you would get as a conversation on the same
definitely.
subject in Facebook, and also going around and getting people's opinions from different regions and different backgrounds. And I think just having something where it was not algorithm dependent, it would just be who turns up, etc., would be quite an interesting way to have and also on the face to face, we're taking
Yes.
away this
Yeah, the
barrier,
barrier, or
this
yeah, the
shield.
hiding, whether
Yeah.
it's whether it's something to hide behind or whether it's a barrier. Yeah, you're right. You take that away completely, and it might be. I
Mm.
guess did you find that perhaps people are a bit reluctant to start talking it to start with, and then it's almost like a bit of a, I don't know, something that creeps out, and everyone then wants to get involved because they're being asked their opinion.
Well, when I joined, the show was already very successful. So it was, sort of primetime TV. People knew what the
Okay.
concept were.
Ah, okay.
The whole premise was you wouldn't get on the bus unless you knew that you were going to be asked a question, kind of thing. And we
Okay.
had two very, very good presenters as well who were, on it in terms of making sure that they managed the conversation and got everybody to speak. So it
Yeah.
worked really well from that point of view. And, you know, um, I think that in a country where people wanted their voices heard, people wanted their opinions out
Yes.
there, it was very important for people to be able to express that, um, and across the generations as well, and different
Yeah.
backgrounds. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
absolutely fascinating. It's an amazing thing. I loved reading about it. It's incredible. And so then you find yourself back in the UK, and
Mm.
obviously, so now, how many years on is that? So how many years ago was that project-ish?
Yeah, so that was sort of yeah, wow, been back since about 2017. So where are we now? So like 7, 8 years.
Okay,
Doesn't feel
wow.
like that, but yeah.
No, I can imagine. So fast forward to now, and you've
Mm.
got your sustainable life coaching business, but you're also involved in Genie and
Yes.
Necessary Nation and People Planet Pint, which I know of already.
Yes.
Just explain a little bit about kind of the business that you have now and your involvement, how you get involved in Genie and the other projects that I've mentioned.
Yeah, so I'm the sustainable life coach. So basically, my services range right from being, very unaware and wanting to find more information about climate change and sustainability, and taking people on a journey through the whole options that are available. So I do carbon literacy training, which is very much the finding out what the climate science is, what you can do about it, taking action from a business or from a personal perspective, with a positive spin on that. And I'm also the communities coordinator for the Carbon Literacy Project. So I do
Okay.
that as a part-time freelance role for them, which is talking about the Community Leaders Toolkit, which is an off-the-shelf product for the people in society that can make decisions. Very important sector. So it's really useful to get them involved and tooled up with all of the information and abilities to make the change. So that's kind of the starter. And then I work with a carbon platform called Notch, who's also part of the accelerator program. And this is about helping businesses to measure where they are and then reduce their emissions and demonstrate that over a 12-month supported program. So then they can use that to win bids, contracts, stay suppliers for the NHS, for example,
Yeah.
and really help them along that program. And with Genie, it's auditing. So independent audits are becoming something that, for example, if you're a B Corp organization,
Yeah.
that will be a requirement with the new standards that have come out. Also with CSRD, the EU directive, again, independent verification of your accounts is needed. So you can't just say, oh, here's my emissions. It's a bit like your taxes. You do need to actually prove these as well. So giving people the option there to have that independent verification. And then I also have coaching program, which is helping people with their sustainability challenges. So that could be just overcoming their personal issues where it comes to lifestyle choices and career moves as well. There's a lot of people who are wanting to sort of shift and pivot into sustainable careers and not sure how to do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, just also business leaders who want to make sure that they pivot their business and that strategy works out, or they can engage their employees, whatever their individual goals are. So I kind of do a lot of
A lot
taking
of
care of
education,
all
I
of it.
think, isn't it? Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
education from you, which is brilliant. And I had probably the same kind of epiphany about 2 years ago that many people, I think you've just said about sustainability as a career and business changes and things and embracing that. And marketing, as I'm sure you'll be well aware, is probably one of the worst industries. I talk about it quite a lot. It's quite a terrifying industry for driving consumerism, materialism,
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. And there are pockets of us who are talking about trying to change that, but it's a really hard one because it could be really difficult to do kind of like change the way that the habits that people have now and how they buy and what they buy, although it is changing, but it's difficult from an industry point of view, from a marketing point of view, to also educate the business owners to make sure that it's not just about profit. Profit's still important to keep obviously longevity of the business, but it's also those other aspects about it as well. So yeah, I did my carbon literacy accreditation about 18 months ago now, and then did another accreditation through the CIM. And for me, that opened my eyes massively as to actually the opportunity, more than anything else, that businesses and organizations and individuals can have, or in front of them, by embracing sustainability, but rather than it just being thinking about kind of recycling or whatever. There's so many other aspects to it. So you mentioned that obviously your main kind of focus is carbon emissions, but I guess for the work you do, whether it's individuals or through business, you maybe expand that to some other pillars, so like the SG type pillars or whatever. It's not just about carbon emissions, I would guess, but those are the most easiest or most accessible to report on right now. Would that be right?
It's the one that is, when we're looking at carrots and sticks, Joe,
Yeah.
it's the one that is ticking the boxes, because there are these requirements coming in terms of, scope 3 and suppliers having to present data. But then there's also the fact that, you can win contracts, multi-million-pound contracts. I've got
Absolutely.
examples of this. based purely on your sustainability score. So there's a lot of movement in that area. There's a lot of obviously it's an emergency, so there is urgency, and there are a lot more chatter online about it. But there are other aspects that I always say I'm trying to put myself out of business, because technically, we want climate change to be, a thing of the past.
Yes.
So that's what I'm trying to achieve. However, once we've kind of made progress on that, there are other objectives coming up fast and thick behind it. So we're looking at biodiversity as well. So nature, there is going to be reporting required for businesses about how they're looking after and helping nature from their perspective. So instead of climate related risk, there's going to be nature related risk, which actually is very important for lots of industries, and they don't even know the slightest bit about how that might massively impact them. And then a huge one is water. Again, it's something that's not talked about. Climate change has got a lot of attention, especially with people who don't agree with the science, shall we say. But these other ones are still just as important, but aren't talked about as much yet, but they will be. So there's still work for me to do.
Yeah, I agree. And me too. And that's partly why, you're on here, because I want people to know about you, and I want people to understand your perspective on this as well. It's not just me kind of like trying to educate people as well. And I think you're right. Clearly these things are going to be talked about. I don't really want it to be a carrot and stick thing. I'd rather businesses and organizations embraced it. I'm sure you feel the same. But yeah, you're right. The directives are coming, and it's definitely going to be more extensive than perhaps it has been so far. But you have said on some of the content I've watched when I've been researching you, you've talked about the growth of green. Do you think it's really significant, the growth of green? And is that just for consumers, or do you think for businesses too? Are you seeing a change? Are you seeing a bit more of an open mind and an embracing of these kind of factors now? Or is it still a pretty much a very slow journey?
It's a bit of both, Joe. So, I am heartened by news where the CBI has produced reports for the past couple of years where the UK economy has been pretty much flat, shall we say. But the green economy has been growing. It was 9% in 2003, 10% in 2004. So it just demonstrates that this is something that is growing and is, taking off, which is great. I see lots of businesses that are, doing good things in that area. I know that post-pandemic specifically, people are looking for more healthier, more sustainable options. It is becoming something that's becoming more normal now that we see solar, we see EV everywhere. So people are getting over that fear of messing up with their businesses and starting to get into a bit more confident stride about how this is returning investment in terms of saving energy, reducing wastes, reducing costs, so that, and also consumers were willing to pay more. So when you're not in the price war with imports or cheap alternatives, you can actually charge more because you can demonstrate that your product is got a good ethical background to it. So there is a lot of that. However, we still find that we've got some of those big fast fashion brands. We've got those delivery companies that aren't really embracing this idea of more and more and more isn't the way that we can keep going. So we see a shift. I talk about a lot of an example where Blockbusters was going to buy Netflix. They had the opportunity to buy Netflix, and they turned them down.
Crazy.
And I did a sort of a stint in Blockbusters during one summer of my university back in the 90s.
Okay.
And there are no Blockbusters anymore, and I think I know why. And it's the same scenario now. If Deborah Meaden says it in her podcast, if you don't have sustainability as part of your business, you will fail. I like to say, if you do have sustainability as part of your business, you're onto a winner.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
yeah.
Yeah, I definitely prefer that kind of angle to it for sure. Yeah, there's much more opportunity. You're right. I
Yeah.
guess the blockbuster thing, people would argue, oh, it's tech and it's like the other. Well, yeah, but tech's still
Mm.
helping, what we do now from again embracing responsibility or embracing sustainability. Like you say, the solar tech is getting much better. It's not as expensive as it was.
Yeah.
There is a conversation about I guess consumers, there being a bit of a privilege. I've talked to a couple of people about this now. There is a level of privilege to be able to buy sustainable products or food or whatever on a regular basis. But, it's like you said, it doesn't stop people actually starting to make those moves and maybe even considering about it. So they might not be buying it, but at least it's there, it's in their conscience and they're thinking about it. So, that is helping the move towards it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there are ways of thinking about it, in terms of, I mean, I was just telling some of the people, I play board games, so I'm a massive nerd when it comes to these things. But I was telling some of the guys last night from my board games group about how I've signed up to the Olio app, and that's about food waste. And the supermarkets, if they reduce it, and it still hasn't gone by the end of the evening, then these people, great, what they're called, Olio hero, food waste heroes, come pick it up, and then I can pick up for free. So
Yeah.
I've saved about £150 so far this year on saving
Amazing.
food waste, and I don't even do it all the time. Um, so there's things where you can be sustainable without having to kind of spend a lot of money, and then that money that you save you can spend on some more sustainable items that might be more expensive now. I've also got a pair of trainers from Hilo. Uh, they are a company that was set up by an ex-professional footballer, but they've designed their products so that once I've finished with them, I can send them back in the same cardboard box. And because they're made of rubber and corn, they can use an industrial composter to decompose my trainers
Yeah. Oh my
completely.
gosh.
So, but they were about £100, £120,
Yeah.
but that's the same sort of price that you would pay for a quality running shoe anyway, and I
Yeah.
wear them all the time, so I'm getting the use out of them. So it's about being smarter, thinking about
Yeah.
um, you know uh, some of the most sustainable consumption choices are just non-consumption choices. And so instead of buying something, saying, hang on a minute, don't I have a jumper like that already? Or, could I rent this dress for a
Absolutely.
wedding instead? So rethinking about what consumption is, and really also taking the blame away from the consumers. It's the
Yes.
producers that are the
Absolutely.
problem, essentially.
Yeah.
I think there's 100 million items from Zara alone on Vinted.
More than likely.
Yes.
Some of them
And
could well be
that's
mine.
and that's frightening, because that just means that instead it's, second hand is becoming another sort of dumping ground, or
Yeah.
just a vast unnecessarily use of all of these resources. So we need to be thinking more cleverly with where we spend our money, thinking about it as a carbon budget, and thinking about what we've got. Can we find joy in what we have already, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
maybe,
Yeah, I saw your I think it was a post maybe you put on about secondhand clothing, like almost becoming the new accessory, the new addiction, really, that we've switched
mm,
from buying, okay, I won't buy new, I'll definitely buy secondhand, but I'll still buy more and more and more and more because
yes,
it's secondhand. And
yes,
therefore I'm helping somebody sell,
yes,
rework their clothes, which again
yes,
becomes a bit of a mindset again, doesn't it? It's like going back to
yeah,
that almost addiction of driving that we need when actually you're right, a lot of the stuff we have. And I don't send my trainers back to their originator, but I have an amazing friend who, in fact two now, who send kids clothing, my clothing, my husband's shirts and work trousers and things like that out to their villages, in one in Tanzania actually and one in Ghana, and they then reuse them. They either restitch them or rework them into something else, or they wear the trainers literally till they fall apart, or they create something else with them. And for me, that's kind of like helping them. It's not ideal because I guess you're shipping it across the sea. So more companies where you can send it back and they can either rework in the UK would definitely be better, wouldn't it? But I think, yeah, there's definitely an ask for producers to be talking about the life cycle, the end of life cycle of their product as well, and their responsibility for that, because I don't think many producers necessarily count that as their responsibility.
Not at the moment.
Mm.
But again, this is where the regulations are coming in to say, that that is something that producers are having to address.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those ones where we all need to wear clothes, but we all have enough clothes for 8 billion people
Yeah.
until 2050 and beyond. We've already produced them all. And it's tricky because yeah, it's a need, but also we've gone past that idea of just wearing something because it's an essential piece of how we live.
Yeah.
And fashion itself is very much an industry that pushes more and more new because it was, seasons, and then it's gone to micro seasons.
Yeah.
And it's again, it's that I talk a lot to clients about mindset and mentality, and that those choices that you can make, and very much about how to, not make those choices in the beginning. So it's easier for you because then you don't have to deal with them when it comes to the end of their life. If
Yeah,
you've
it's
got
true.
less to start with, you've got less to process in terms of, where all of this stuff might go.
Yeah.
So, and saving money at the same time, we've been tricked into this consumption pattern. And I know that there's definitely people in the public eye who've said, oh, I spend this much on my lunch. And then they said, oh, I can't afford to go on holiday. And I'm like, well, perhaps if you spent less on your lunch, then you would be able to go on holiday. But
Common
it's that
sense,
idea.
right?
Yeah, But I think that because there's advertising everywhere pushing
Yeah.
people into spending that, where's the advertising that's saying, hey, maybe if you didn't buy those things, then you would be able to afford something else and have a bit more financial, consideration, as
Yeah.
well as consumption and environmental consideration in there
Yeah.
as
And I think that's clearly where my industry comes in, and
well.
I hold my hands up on behalf of it. But, like I say, things are changing. Hopefully they will continue to, well, they should continue to change, and they will be required to, I
They
guess, from what you
will,
said
yeah,
about the legislation and things anyway. But
yes,
also, I think hopefully it'll change with good grace as well, as in, my industry needs to want to make that change and understand the reasons why as well. Hence, again, why I've got the podcast. So, all my lovely marketeers that I speak to so far, they are on board with me clearly, but it's just those
mm,
maybe those other industries, sorry, that aren't quite there yet, that need to really think cleverly. Like you said, it doesn't have to be about carbon emissions. It doesn't have to be really static about this, like this trade-off from this or the other. It's about having that balance and working out cleverly what can be done to help, whether it's consumers, whether it's education, whatever that might be. Definitely.
yeah.
So the other barriers, so you've mentioned a few things, again, on your content and things about sunk cost fallacy, for example, optimism bias, social proof, which is a massive one for me at the moment. So about being able to evidence social impact positively. Can you just talk a little bit about those? So what do they mean? And secondly, how would we, or how could we actually measure social impact? So as proof of evidence of what's happening.
Yeah, so I have carbon literacy for marketing professionals as well, and really we talk in there about these legislation requirements and how it often lands on the marketer's desk as something that they need to do.
Yes.
And suddenly they kind of go, oh my gosh, why is it my job? And then they also are the people that often get it massively in the neck when something doesn't land well, or the
Yeah,
backlashes on social media, and it's like, oh
absolutely. Yeah.
my gosh. So, there's a lot of like green hushing going along, which is where people don't speak about the stuff that they're doing
Yeah.
because they're frightened of this. And I can understand that, the marketing professionals are not, sort of climate experts, but they're expected to do this And what we talk about in our course is about how to connect with, the product designer, with, the salespeople and everybody else within the organization.
Yeah.
Get the report, see what the emissions report is telling you. We help to interpret that and say, just be clear, be honest, provide the data, provide just a QR code so you can direct your consumers to all the information.
Yeah.
You do not need to be the expert. You need to be the expert on how to tell them
Yeah. How to
where to
communicate
get that
Yeah,
information. Yeah.
exactly right.
And it's really great because then they start to get it. And, we put in a few little exercises for them to do, and they really enjoy all of that, so it takes it from being something horrible into something really, inspirational and exciting, because it's a creative industry, right? So you want to
Yeah.
be able to do things that take something that's an edge, that's unique, that's different,
Yeah.
and celebrate that, rather than
Absolutely.
thinking, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do this? I don't know what I'm supposed to be talking about, and I don't know whether I'm going to get it wrong. So it's really important to provide that. And with the different services that I provide, with the evidence that you can get from the reporting, with the audits, it celebrates all the different areas that you're doing well, and it allows you to take those pieces and put that into a story, put it into social media posts, put it on your packaging in a way that that isn't going to be pulled up by the Green Claims Code,
Yeah.
isn't going to be called out by the EU and get you into trouble, and also really resonate with clients. Because, that is something, again, that if you can tell it in a really interesting way, I mean, look at some of the most famous campaigns that you've got out there. Apple, Nike, and Coca-Cola. They don't talk about the product. They talk about how it makes you feel.
Yeah. It's the emotion, isn't it?
Yeah. And I talk about how um, the secret to happiness to me is that there was a piece of paper, a research paper that came out a few years ago that said recycling doesn't make sense for humans, because time and effort and efficiency and all that kind of stuff, we should just put it in the bin, and then that bin would just be taken away, right? So why do we bother separating out recycling? Why do we enjoy recycling? So it's because we're doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And Aristotle said the secret of the definition of happiness is doing the right things for the right reasons. So recycling makes us happy. So
I've never
if
thought of it that way, but yeah, I do like separating my rubbish. It's really ridiculous.
wheeling it out, here I
Yeah.
am with my recycling bin, all those things give us this boost. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what drinking Coca-Cola does, using your iPhone, all those things, they just do it. That's not saying this is a trainer and we've got a lovely like swish on it, whatever.
Yeah.
This is saying this is the feeling that you get for wearing a Nike
Yeah. It's
product.
freedom or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. And so this is exactly how we can tap into what sustainability gives people, because I have it all the time. I have my learners on my courses saying, oh my gosh, this is just common sense. It's not that hard. I have my cousin showing me how much money she saved because she's put solar on her roof. These people don't necessarily need to be sustainability nerds. They don't need to be driven
Yeah.
by sustainability. What they need to do is to enjoy what sustainability can give them, and whether that's reducing anxiety, reducing costs, making them feel connected with nature, whatever, protecting the future for the grandchildren, whatever it is that makes them think, oh, I'm doing the right thing for the right reasons. Key
Yeah.
to happiness.
Yeah,
Key to
absolutely. I
happiness.
love that. I love the whole happiness relationship thing there. I've
Mm,
not heard that before, but you're absolutely
yeah.
right. And I think maybe it's a case of, climate change. Maybe this is an output of the media. I don't know. Climate change is almost like a horror story, and
Yep.
people are maybe a bit bored or a bit like,
Yes.
oh my God, and whether you agree with the science or not, it's just one of those subjects that doesn't want to be talked about. People don't want to talk about it. It won't affect me, but why is it raining all year? It's that kind of thing, isn't it? But yeah, I think you're right. When you bring the happiness and the pleasure into it and talk about what that impact can have, then that's the difference. And I guess that's how, and I've tried to change the language that I use quite a lot away from away from purely about carbon emissions, and talk about kind of like what happens in the community, what happens internally in the communities within a business or an organization, what happens externally, and nature and all that kind of stuff, and bring, because it's a much wider picture. And again, maybe that's why it's so complicated, because it is, or it can be so overwhelming, because it's such a wide subject matter. And
Yes.
the more we can educate and break it down into small bits, eat your elephants bit by bit, then maybe that's the way to do it, and hopefully that will definitely work. So just explain what the sunk cost fallacy, what is that about?
So this is when you're kind of I related it to summit fever, which is when a lot of the time I've listened to more podcasts, sorry, previously
Stop apologizing, it's fine. More podcasts are available.
Yes, about people who are mountaineers. Now, I'm massively afraid of heights, so this is the opposite of my world. I do not want to go anywhere near the top of a mountain under any circumstances.
I'll remember that when I see you next.
Yes. So this idea of climbing up these sheer rock faces and all that stuff is absolute madness for me to start with. But these people love it, so that's fine. They can do their thing. But I've heard a lot of stories where people get so far and so invested into climbing, especially places like K2 and Everest, etc., that they'll see the top and they'll do anything to get to the top, even if it means that they'll die.
Right.
Because they've put in so much in order to get there that we must reach it, even if the common sense approach is to turn back.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit about what we've done with our systems and our society and how we live. We've invested so much into a fossil fuel based environment that changing that and taking the common sense approach doesn't feel like the right thing to do. It feels like we've already come so far and invested so much that we can still going on and reach the peak of society and reach the peak of human. But actually the idea is that we have to go back down the mountain and think about how the best way to get up it now it is now compared to sort of 50 years ago. So this is where this is that idea of where people may have bought, a lovely car, and they're like, I don't want to give up my car. But actually, if they did sort of think about, well, taking a bicycle trip or walking instead, I still have my lovely car, but because I've invested so much in the car, I don't have to take the car all the time. It'll be healthier for me. It'll be healthier for the environment. So, just rethinking what we've invested in, whether that is from a identity point of view, have I invested in this from a political perspective? Have I invested in this from a how I present myself? Or can I actually think, hang on a minute, the person 2 doors down is obviously getting cheap electricity, and so should I.
Yeah, it's true. I guess it's like, well, going back to your mountain climbing analogy, not that I've climbed many, I've climbed 1 or 2, but it's that acclimatization thing, isn't it? Where you go, if you go above a certain height, you have to go up the mountain and stay there for a little bit, then come back down a bit and get used to that, and then go back up a bit further, come back down a bit. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? So almost like you say, we can see the top of the mountain perhaps for society, but we need to come back down and redress and rethink what we've got now. And actually, is that the best way to get to the top of the mountain? Because maybe it's not anymore. Things have changed and things do happen.
Yeah, and there's a piece of research that came out of MIT a few months ago, and it says, what are the 2 things that people really want to know about climate change? The first one was a little bit more about the science, because it's not the first thing that the average person wakes up in the morning and goes, hey, today I really want to find out more about climate change because, I don't have all these other things to do that are
Yeah.
more important.
Yeah.
And science isn't necessarily sexy. It is also something that most people haven't done since school and we're
Yeah.
glad to get rid of. It's a
True.
complicated subject. It's not, the easiest thing to understand. So, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of people on YouTube that are saying things that aren't backed up by evidence. So
Okay.
people want to know enough so that they can figure that out themselves. They can find out more about what they're interested in and get a clearer picture. So that's one part, which is great because carbon literacy deals with that. So good.
Yeah.
The other part is about wanting to make sure that if they change to something, it isn't going to be worse than what we have now. So again, cars are a very good example. People don't
Yes.
want to invest into an EV to find that they can't do what they can in an existing internal combustion engine
Yeah.
vehicle. So that's that fear. And also the previous issues that we've had, where it was like, oh, diesel was better. And then we found out that they'd been lying to us the whole time. And, diesel was worse. And so people had swapped to diesel cars and then they felt like they were being tricked and, and so
Yeah.
they don't want to move to another vehicle and then find out that that has also been a bunch of lies. So,
Mm.
so these are very normal, practical, understandable things. Yes, you would want to know a bit more so you don't stand in the pub when somebody's talking about it and feel, hang on a minute, I can't have a conversation.
Yeah.
And my friend's really concerned about, the emissions from a cup of tea or something, or the pint of beer that they're having at that
Yeah.
point. And also, they don't want to then think, oh, well, I'm going to go home now. How do I get home? And is that impacting it? Is my choice the best choice? Have I, made a mistake? But if I
Yeah.
choose something different, am I going to stand out? Is it going to be reliable? All these other things. So
Yeah.
it's normal.
It's true. I'm even having that conversation with my husband about cars at the moment,
Mm,
where I still, and don't shun me or judge me on this one, I still have a diesel car because I haven't found
mhm.
one that does the mileage, on a charge that I need. Although actually things are much better now. And so we're now having that discussion again, saying,
Yep,
right, okay, well, if we need a 4x4, which can be, that box can be ticked, and
yep,
the mileage that can be charged for, yeah, that's fine.
yep.
So actually, that change probably will be fairly imminent now. Now that
Yes,
the option, now the opportunities are there. The choices are
yes,
there for us to decide on, but they weren't maybe even just 2 years ago when we were talking about
yes,
changing cars. So
yeah.
yeah, it's definitely something that's, you're right. There's that fear for jumping to the next thing because I don't want to spend most of my time trying to charge my car on the M1 or whatever at an extortionate price, which actually doesn't help me at all and makes my life more difficult, which is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting thing because I just wanted to pick up on that. This is my coaching mind coming in because it's all about this judgment idea. And
Yeah.
I think one of the main things that we need to get over is nobody is perfect,
Yes.
especially me, in terms of like, I am not here to tell people how to be perfect because it is going to be impossible.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, for the best will of the world, if we can get most people to be better,
Yeah.
then that problem is going to reduce significantly. So, even on the best days, if you could reduce your footprint down and, if you could be 75% good, we're all right. Yeah, because there are still things like, yes, you will still need to use your car until there's another available. I eat cheese because I love it. And unfortunately, I don't very much like nuts. So the other alternative to cheese, it just doesn't cut the mustard. Occasionally I might have a bath rather than a shower. So, there are these things that mean, but it goes down to actually a marketing principle in the first place, which was that it was Ogilvy
Yeah.
who promoted the concept of a carbon footprint, which was a concept created by Rees and Wackenagel, two researchers in the 90s. And BP used that to put this responsibility, this judgment, this guilt
Yeah.
onto us as the consumer. And has BP done anything about their footprint in the meantime? So yes, all of our choices make a difference.
Yeah.
So I hardly eat beef, I've swapped my milk out, I've changed my bank, my pension, some really big ones. My job is sustainability,
Yeah.
you know, all sorts of different manners, but there are a few little small things that mean I can't be 100% of the time. And I don't
Yeah.
expect other people to be that either. But it's about developing the mindset to say, hang on a minute, like as I said, my board game group last night, they were instead of buying new, they've been buying off eBay, So just shifting a little bit and seeing those changes and making it normal and making it a conversation with people and saying, hey, how did you find that you swapped from, cow's milk to non-dairy? Have a conversation about it. But remember at the back of the mind things like the climate shadow. So this is, who you vote for, whether that's in the polls or with your wallet,
Okay. Yeah,
your
good.
conversations with people, the big choices, that pivoting in career. So, moving into more sustainable jobs, and influencing others with your choices, being the change and
Yeah.
saying, like having a vegan pizza and then saying that, asking people if they'd like to try it. Most people think vegan food tastes horrible. And
Yeah.
then when they try it and they go, actually, this is really nice.
Yeah, a lot of it's really nice these days,
Yes.
actually.
So those kind of things
Yeah.
are a way of saying we don't have to be perfect. We can try our best. But, in the sustainability world, we're not aiming for perfection. We're aiming for as best as we can within the limits that we have,
Yeah, and
present.
I think that reflects back to what you said about marketing. So when you said you were
Mm,
obviously working with marketeers on the carbon literacy as well, where there is some fear. There's lots of fear with businesses and
yep,
marketers talking about green projects or activity,
yep,
sustainable business practices, all that kind of stuff, because of that judgment piece. And actually, what I say to people is like, it's not necessarily about you being perfect straight away,
yeah,
because no one's going to be perfect straight away,
no,
but it's about educating people on your journey. So giving yourself
yes,
some steps and some goals
100%.
to
Yeah,
achieve, and then
yeah,
explaining what your progress is. And if it
yeah,
doesn't work or something goes wrong, that's
yeah,
also fine, because that's learning for
yeah,
you and for other people, either in your industry or cross industry, whatever that might be. But at least you're trying something. And if that doesn't work, okay, again, acclimatize, go back down the mountain. Let's have another thing. Let's go this way instead. And that's
yeah.
got to be the way forward, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I mean, Patagonia are a great example of an
Yeah.
organization that can really spin things on their head and they're very confident about doing things. So they're a great inspiration and a great bold organization to say that we'll do it so that other people can feel that they can do it as well. And yeah, you know what?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's literally 99% of the time when I do workshops with clients, and we talk about stuff and I say, well, what have you done already? And they give me this list.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great, why aren't you talking about this?
Exactly.
You've done all of this. And then I say, okay, what are you working on at the moment? Here's the list. Yeah. And then what are the things that you'd like to do, but you can't do because the technology isn't there, or you haven't found a supplier that can do that for you.
Yeah.
Here's that list. That is what you need to tell your customer. Things that you've done,
Yeah.
things that you're working on, and things that you can't quite change yet because there isn't a solution for it, but you
Yeah.
know it. And
Exactly.
that honesty, that transparency, taking them on that journey, showing all the things that you can do. It's also great for your staff as
Yeah.
well because they get to understand it. If you've got board members, if you've got investors, everybody, all the stakeholders, so your supply chain as well, they might think, oh, hang on a minute, I could do a bit of that. Or actually, we're
Absolutely right.
working on
Yeah.
this solution, or do we want to collaborate? It starts all of these exciting conversations, this innovation, this way of being a different type of business. And it's
Mm.
not about necessarily being in competition all the time anymore. It's about how can we do things in a new, interesting way that's relevant to everybody who's involved, whether that's recruiting the latest top university graduates, or whether it is, making sure a family, a business who's got a legacy wants to take that legacy through the next generations by having a truly sustainable business that not only focuses on profit, but focuses on their people, on the
Mm.
planet, and on their purpose as well.
Yeah.
So, putting it all together into it's nice. It's nice. Everybody.
It's a really great area to be in, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
exciting. And I think from my, again, going back to marketing, from my point of
Mm.
view, it gives marketing a massive like boost of energy because there's
Yes.
so much to do and so much to talk about, so much
Hmm.
opportunity, so many ways to be creative with that. And that's what I absolutely
Yeah.
love about it. So do you
Yeah.
ever get to the point where you find the speed of change really frustrating to the point where you're a bit like, I just can't be bothered anymore. I'm gonna give up. I'm just gonna like, live my life, my little bubble. Do you ever get that? Or are you just like, no, I need to do this. This is my calling. You like to educate and inform and help.
Yeah, I figured out a couple of things, not fairly recently, but within sort of starting up this my business, which is that I was brought up to be sustainable by default.
Okay.
So that's a concept where, because we didn't have a lot in our family, my mum didn't waste any food. We ate leftovers. We used the freezer. We didn't have a car for certain periods. We had
Yeah.
hand-me-down clothes. So, a lot of what we did was because we didn't have a lot, and that is, sustainable by default. So there's a lot of people out there who, are struggling with cost of living and
Yeah.
the economic, but they're sustainable by default because they're the one taking the bus like me. So, we've got to celebrate these people who are living a great low carbon lifestyle,
Yeah.
as opposed to the ones who've got a pimped out pink, Range Rover or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, so there was that, and then also I didn't realize I had eco anxiety and because it wasn't a thing when I had eco anxiety, because my journey started when I saw my parents used to watch the news a lot, so I saw a lot of it when I was younger, and the Exxon Valdez oil spill and all the birds and
Yeah.
the Amazon being on fire, the ozone hole layer, that all inspired me to start my journey and to get my degree. So that was eco anxiety before it was even coined as a phrase. So all of those things that, yeah, it is exhausting. There's things every day. There's great progress. There's a guy called Assad Rasook who has a great book about how to save the planet without the BS.
Okay.
And he has a LinkedIn post every week, and it talks about all the great things and all the not so good things, but it's a good balance. And so does Catherine Hayhoe, who's a brilliant climate scientist. She talks about, again, the good stuff that's happening, mass deployment of solar around the world. Yeah, East Africa, Kenya, a good 90% of their electricity is, geothermal and solar,
Oh,
etc.
wow.
So,
I had no idea.
yeah, so
Yeah.
all of these really cool things that are going on,
Yeah.
really great project, bio plastics, which are made from seaweed and all sorts of different great leaps forward to try and balance out that issue where there are things where certain countries decide that they're not going to be part of the Paris Agreement anymore. We've breached the 1.5 degrees aim of the Paris agreement. There are
Yeah.
still very much, well, in this country, lots of licenses that were going to be given out for coal mines and, oil fields as well. So, those things still happen, and every
Yeah. It's
day
like yin and
something
yang, isn't
comes
it?
up. But if I gave, I think, yeah, it's such a core part of my personality because of this inbuilt default
Yeah.
and this the driver, the two sort of combination things together with the motivation. But yeah, it would be lovely to retire in Italy with a nice sparkling glass of cool prosecco or something, and a good decent cheese, etc. But yeah, until that happens, there's plenty to do. It does make me get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
But it's also incredibly satisfying as well because, you know, it's a nice result every time I work with somebody, especially in the coaching space. People love it. They turn up and they're so enthusiastic and they've achieved loads of things. And a lot of it can be like personal connections. It could be, how they've how they've worked with their family and had remote cooking sessions, and they've been teaching them how to make vegan meals, or going on long bus journeys and celebrating that with their family and friends, and
Yeah.
taking them along to People Planet Pint as well, and saying, well, the
Yeah.
worst thing that can happen is you get free beer, right? So
I know. I know. It's crazy that, isn't it?
yeah, so I just see it as something that once people get it, especially in businesses as well, once they start seeing the results, and it could just only be a couple of little things. It could be
Yeah.
the fact that, hang on, that's saved us, significant amount of money. And also the staff seem to enjoy this and be happier and all this kind of thing. Actually, isn't that a nice way to be at work for an incredible amount of time in our lives?
Exactly.
Isn't it nice to make it a nicer place to be, a nicer, healthier atmosphere and
Yeah.
less pollution,
And I think sometimes the small wins, they don't always have to be financial either, right? So sometimes it's to
No,
do with the culture at work, or it just makes someone's day just that bit easier. And like you say, we're at work so many hours of the day. We spend most of our time really probably with our work family as opposed to our home family, maybe. Yeah, so all those kind of different wins are absolutely vital. And it's been so lovely to have you on here. Thank you so much for your time. I
no
literally could
problem.
talk to you for hours. So I'm
Yes,
excited to meet you face to face at some point and we can talk more. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, but for now, would you like to just explain or just signpost our listeners and our watchers to where they can find you as the Sustainable Life Coach, but also the other projects you're involved in? Do you want to give it a little bit of shout out for those?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me at thesustainablelifecoach.com on the internet, or you can find me on LinkedIn as Annie Soulsby. That's Soulsby. Yeah, the Carbon Literacy Project, we've certified more than 132,000
One of them
people
is
as
me,
carbon
by the
literacy.
way. One of them is me.
So, yes, I have lots of courses for businesses, for individuals, for marketing professionals, and I also do train the trainer courses now. But if you are interested in the community leaders course as well, you can contact me for that through the Carbon Literacy Project. Just go to carbonliteracy.com. If you want to see us in person, I'm the host of the Newcastle People Planet Pint. So thanks to Small 99 for their setting that up. It's a great way to connect with other sustainability minded people in a no agenda meetup with, as I say, no pressure. Just find out who's there and have a nice conversation, maybe solve the planet's problems. All good. We've also got Net Zero Nations Accelerator Program. We're launching that in the Northeast, and that's a great program to get on board to put all those wins into demonstrable action and to get the rewards from that in terms of lowering your emissions and proving that to funders, to local government bids, to your clients, and to your supply chain. Then also, if you want to have auditing, then you can speak to us at Genie, that's GENEE.org.uk, to get those audits done, especially if you're looking at renewing B Corp. And then, yeah, if you've got any other ideas, I literally can do presentations, webinars, workshops, or anything from environmental health and well-being, or to plastics and how to reduce plastics, and we're talking about how important water scarcity and water pollution is. So lots of different topics. Just drop me a line and I can talk to your staff or talk to your volunteers, whoever they are, and we can have a nice fun time talking about that and how we can solve it all together in a nice way.
Amazing. Thank you. I don't know how you have time to sleep, to be honest.
I don't really, to
No,
be
I was
honest.
gonna
It's,
say
it's
you
a
must have
perk of the
some special
menopause.
medicine, I think, that keeps you awake all the time, all the hours.
It's a perk of the menopause when you I did a presentation at a tech event a few weeks ago, and the title was the technology that we need to get to net zero. And at 2:45 in the morning, I came up with the presentation because it was going to be, okay, well, we invented batteries in 1800, and I went through about all the things that we've already invented, how
Yeah.
all the technology is here, we just need to use it. Mic drop. So yeah, I don't actually sleep that much.
Wow. Yeah. I think there'll be a few people contacting you to work through the night as well.
Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you,
Like,
Annie. Yeah,
yeah,
thank you
thank
so
you.
much again. I definitely will pick up with you again for the podcast. Maybe I don't know, 6 months, 9 months down the line and just see what is changing, what has changed, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been so lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me. It was
And
brilliant.
thank you to our watchers and listeners, and I will see you next time. You've been listening to the Responsible Marketing Podcast. You can contact me with any questions or comments by email at joe@jolonconsulting.com or find me on LinkedIn. All recordings of the podcast can be found on the usual podcast channels, as well as on YouTube if you prefer to watch rather than just listen. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe, which helps the podcast to be found by more people. And of course, feel free to share it on your socials, with your friends and your colleagues. That's it for now. So until next time, thanks for listening.